Hey y'all. So as we head into Esther 7, Haman has just been humiliated by parading Mordecai around all of the people, saying that the king delighteth in he, because he saved the king from an assassination attempt years before. But, he's still pretty happy because he's about to head into day 2 of a second banquet with Esther the queen and King Ahasuerus, our headache king, right? So he goes into that and they're serving all the courses, and once again Esther is like serving him and giving him meal after meal, and finally they get to the wine course, the course of wines, which happens at the very end of these very long Persian meals. So as she serves the wine, the king once again asks of her, "Hey Esther, what is thy petition? Up to half of my kingdom." And if you're keeping track, that's 3 times. She could have had this kingdom 3 times. So because of that, Esther chooses this as her moment. And this is where, to me, we see the importance of showing up. Even when you're scared, even when you're worried, even when you're emotional. Like, think of the fear Esther had. She knows she has to tell not only about Haman, but she's been lying to her husband for years about her faith and who she is. She knows that in order to do this, it can't just be about her, right? Like Mordecai said to her, "What if you were made for such a time as this?" And I think that's so pivotal to us as we head into a season where it can be about us, and it shouldn't be. It's really about loving others, right? It's easy to love thyself, but this is going to be about how do we show up for other people. So at this meal, when the king asks Esther this question, she says, "Well, there's this guy who's like trying to kill like all my people and kill me, and it's real bad," right? And the king is like, "Well, who is this?" Now, that Esther says this in a way that's real fascinating to me, because it's real hard being a woman, which we've talked about so often here in Esther. Because remember, the king signed the petition. So technically Esther has to do this in a way that not only like implicates Haman, but doesn't like throw the blame on the king, because Xerxes or Ahasuerus, his ego is large, right? And she knows that. So she doesn't want to put it on him, and she knows that she's been deceiving him. So it's a real careful way that she illustrates what's happening to her people, that they're going to be killed, destroyed, and to perish, right? She uses the exact same terminology that was used in the decree to give out her announcement. So when the king says, "Well, wait, who is this? Who's doing this?" Because ultimately, right, whoever's doing this is wanting to take away Esther, to take away his queen. That's going to be the second queen that he lost through crazy circumstances. So then Esther does the big reveal here in 7. She says, "Well, it's this guy. It's Haman. It's the dude that we've been sitting at with meals for." And the king is so mad. He says, like, who could do this, right? And you could take that as like he's angry about his wife and his kingdom, but from what we know about Ahasuerus, it's really more about like who's like connived and thrown this against the king, who's put this against the royal house, who's manipulated this in a way that like no one should manipulate the royal house. And in fact, Ahasuerus gets so mad, so furious, that he has to leave. He goes out into the gardens, right? So that leaves Haman and Esther alone. And let's dig in a little bit to the background of their culture here, right? The reality is no man is supposed to be like alone with a woman. He's not, that Persian said that you shouldn't come within 7 steps of the woman alone, right? The only men who could approach the women were the eunuchs, right? Which would have been the chamberlains in the house. So Haman has 2 choices when the king leaves. He can either leave, which really like probably says he's pretty guilty of what he was just accused of, or he can stay and risk the idea of violating once again tradition and standard and royal law. So he stays, and he stays to beg of Esther for mercy. And let's be fair, Esther could have given mercy at this time. But the reality is, as long as Haman was around, as long as these friends who sought to just kill the Jews and her people were there, there is a threat to who they are. So she has to take this opportunity to risk her own like deceit to her husband, to put her own queenship on the line. But more than that, it's not about her, and Esther knows that. She has shown up in order to give God's light into this situation, and God's light exposes all kinds of truths, right? Because it is truth. And so that's what Esther knows, is she knows that she's now just a vessel for God's movement and dance in this entire story. So as Haman is begging of Esther, right? And if you imagine begging and pleading, right? He ends up falling upon the couch that she was sitting on. And that happens to be the moment that the king comes back in, and he sees him kind of like on her couch. And he says, what, are you going to like defile her in front of me now? Like, because it's been 2 dinners with just the king, Esther, and Haman. And the king is a real jealous king, right? So it's got to be like, 1 is something, but 2, could something be going on? But then on top of that, what are you doing staying around with her? Why are you, first of all, you throw your own manipulation, you move me to do things, and now you're once again gonna like violate our law, violate our traditions, and throw them right in the king's face. The king has these headaches, right? The king headache, right? You're gonna throw it in his face. So he's angry. And the chamberlains who once went and got Vashti, who was the first queen, and we're going to bring her in, right? These are the eunuchs who can approach the women. They go to Haman and they cover his face. They right away take action to remove him from where he's going to go. And what happened next is what we've all been waiting to get hung up on, right? Haman is hung on the very gallows, the very place that he was going to have Mordecai hanged. And the irony of Esther as we move through the king and the queen and these parties and these dinners and all of these, young virgins and then all of this action, right? And then this Holocaust and this decree is that the Jewish people were about to be slaughtered, killed, and put to perish for something they really hadn't done. Well, they hadn't done, not really, right? And Haman is actually going to be hanged not because of the Holocaust, not because of all that he did against these people, not because of the conniving and the manipulation and the power hungriness of him. He's going to be hanged for something he didn't actually do. Right? He didn't do anything to Esther, but that's what the king's interpretation is when he comes back. And the king's interpretation is what matters here. So at that point, Haman is hanged where he was going to have Mordecai hanged. And then what scripture tells us is the king's mood just improved. He was at peace after that, because our king is all about that ego, right? So for him, once he knew that his own personal attack had been assuaged, he was at peace. What still is outstanding for us is that nothing has changed for Esther and the Jewish people. The law for their destruction, for being killed, is still out there. It's gone throughout the land. There's still all these men that are willing to carry out the order, whether they believe in it or not. There's still a kingdom that is horrified, but our king is at peace. So we're not done with Esther. Esther has more work to do with the Lord and God guiding her steps. And as long as she seeks his face and he guides her steps, then Esther is going to move in a way that we won't expect. So join us on Sunday when we dive into the scriptures to take a look at what's going to happen to Esther and these Jewish people, and how she's going to now be able to make some headway, and the waymaker will make a way without Haman in the way. Chatting at Cheesman. Happy Friday. See you on Sunday.